And a good Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. As we do typically on Thursdays, we're going to start off talking about some rainfall, as we did just get a new update to our drought monitor. So let's go ahead and recap what we have seen so far in the month of December, specifically going back to as of last weekend, because that's all the rain that got taken into account as of this week's drought monitor. So here's a look. The past 2 days, we haven't recorded any rain to take into account, say, for next week's drought monitor. But of the month of December, it looks like 4 days have not recorded rainfall. So 10 days into the month, 6 out of those 10 days, we have recorded some form of rainfall at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. However, this cluster of the last 4 days hasn't really amounted to much, maybe only about another just over a quarter of an inch of rainfall fell on top of what we got in bulk, really, for the first and the second day of the month. So 1.24 inches of rain on the first and the second, and then adding about another 0.36 inches to that. So in total, we're hovering just over an inch and a half of rainfall in the month of December. Pretty good progress and making our way to average of just over 4 inches of rainfall. Doesn't look like we're on pace for anything record-breaking, and I do say that because it looks like we're entering another dry stretch for the extended period of your forecast. So let's talk about your drought monitor as of December 9th. First things first, remember how I was talking to you about the rainfall totals earlier in this extended forecast. They were a lot higher in areas down to the south and the southwest of us. Well, we have seen many areas on the state line taken out of an exceptional drought. However, they still do lie under an extreme drought. Here in Central Georgia, we didn't really see any change, unfortunately. It doesn't look like that was that much rain in order to alleviate some of our dry conditions. We still see this patch of a moderate drought down in areas of Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery counties. Looks like it may be expanded a little bit over to the west into southeast Wilcox County and the southern tip of Dodge County. Moderate drought also just to the north of us, but everyone in Central Georgia for the most part does remain under a severe drought. But it is good to see that the extreme drought that was in portions of southern Chris County, that no longer stands. That receded back down to the south. So not too much change with this, and I do imagine we are probably going to see these conditions maybe even worsen with next week's update, because we really don't have much in the way of rain to talk about. But there will be a few shower chances as we eye our approaching of our next cold front. So we had cold front number 1 as of yesterday. Later yesterday, that brought us some passing cloud cover during the evening hours into the nighttime frame. And we also still have some lingering breezy conditions courtesy of that frontal boundary. But it also is the main reason we will see a brief cool down as we go into this afternoon compared to how it did feel throughout the afternoon yesterday. But very cold next week. That's what the next frontal boundary is going to do. Usher in maybe some of the coldest air of the winter season so far. We're talking about some temperatures that could get down below 25 degrees, even into the lower 20s across Central Georgia. So we'll break down everything that you need to know. And first things first, I would give you a glimpse of the quad view, but that has not necessarily been working this morning because our Warner Robins Skycam is down. However, we got a gorgeous image on the Skycam this morning. But we'll talk about this current image that we do see. Plenty of the deep blue color in the sky. It started out mostly cloudy, if you can believe it or not, earlier this morning, but that cloud cover has moved on, and what's going to ensue is going to be plenty of sunshine over the course of really the next 2 days. It's looking like, maybe even lingering into the next 3 days. So let's take a look at that gorgeous image that I did take a screenshot of this morning. Here's your downtown Macon Skycam. I moved it a little bit over towards the east, directly where that sun was coming up from. And we do have decent enough breaks in the cloud cover off to the east and within the cloud cover directly over us that did allow for some of that sunlight and those beautiful colors to get reflected off the bottom of the cloud deck. So you see some shades of pink, some shades of red, some shades of yellow. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous image in Macon, but honestly, not even my favorite. Take a look at downtown Dublin, where you do see widespread pink colors, orange colors, yellow, just spectacular imagery as you walk out the door, and really makes you forget about maybe some of the cold temperatures that you walked outside to this morning. And then the Georgia National Fairgrounds was also a sight to see. And my favorite thing about this image right here is on the right side of your screen. The reflection of all those colors, not only off the bottom of the clouds, but that reflecting off the pond right here. Look at that. It just looks like a sea of orange right here just to the south of the clock tower. So obviously spectacular imagery. We soaked this up, and many of you have sent in some amazing photos in the Weather Network, commented on my Facebook post. Continue to let those roll in because I can never get enough of this image that we saw this morning. So here's a look at your temperatures now as we go towards 11 a.m. Actually some 50s on your temperature map. And we do have many of your temperatures scattered about the mid and the upper 40s, but 50 degrees, the warmest number in Vidalia, McRae, down to Rochelle, Cordele, and up in Bleckley County in Cochran. So we are warming up accordingly, but it is going to be a fairly slow warm up throughout the rest of today because that cooler air mass behind yesterday's frontal boundary is still making its presence known. So it will be cooler up to the north as compared to farther down to the south. Here's a look at the eastern United States. And you can see this cooler air taking over areas of kind of getting into the Tennessee Valley region, the southern Great Lakes portion of the country. 29 in Indianapolis, 29 in Lexington, 37 just north of us in Nashville, 32 in St. Louis. But down to the south of us, we still hold on to plenty of green. 58 in Jacksonville, 62 in Orlando, a 60 over in Houston, and up into the Appalachian Mountains in the Mid-Atlantic, 38 in Washington, 42 in Virginia Beach, but 50 was our warmest temperature, more reminiscent of how it feels over in Charleston, but we're feeling pretty similar to Montgomery, sitting at exactly the same temperature as Macon and Jackson, Mississippi, one state over. To the west is only 1 degree warmer than that number. So your winds and your wind gusts right now, they were a factor this morning, and one of the reasons why we didn't necessarily see our actual temperatures drop as low as they could. When you have a breeze that lingers into those overnight hours, it does kind of allow for maybe pushing of any kind of surface radiation that you are trying to send back out into the atmosphere. So you are going to start to see maybe some slightly warmer numbers than forecasted, but this was one of two reasons. And it's kind of counterintuitive, and I said that all morning long because yes, the breeze maybe didn't allow for the temperatures to go as low as they could. However, the breeze did result in some feels-like temperatures even cooler than what the actual temperatures read, so obviously not having too much of an influence. But 18-mile-per-hour breeze, or gust, I rather should say, up here in Macon. Your sustained breeze anywhere from around 9, maybe 7, 8, or 9 miles per hour at the lowest to around 12 or 13, maybe even 14 miles per hour. So sustained winds kind of in that same range as yesterday, 5 to 15 miles per hour. That's what the breeze is consistently blowing at, but we could have some occasional gusts that get up to around 20 miles per hour throughout today. So a lot of your feels like numbers are still a couple degrees below what they actually read. Low 40s farther to the north as compared to the mid 40s that we saw on your temperature map, and then transitioning into mid 40s the farther south where we did see some upper 40s, but areas that are into the 50s, that's kind of the cutoff line to where the breeze isn't really making it feel even colder. So we do see some feels like numbers maybe right there at 50 degrees, like Sandersville, Vidalia, feels like 51 in McRae, and just saw that temperature update right there, feels like 52 degrees down in Unadilla. So 25, that was your recorded low temperature yesterday morning. I believe that matches the coldest temperature we've seen so far in this cooler season, and that happened nearly a month ago, actually exactly a month ago today, back on November 11th, because I remember it was Veterans Day and we broke a record low temperature. Well, believe it or not, even as cold as it was yesterday morning, we didn't even really get close to the record set back in 2010 of 19 degrees. But I think the most important takeaway was right at average yesterday for your high temperature of 62 degrees. Remember, a lot of graphics were saying we top out in the mid 50s. I had more confidence that we'd go somewhere right there around the 60-degree mark, but we went 1 degree above what I had forecasted. But glad I doubled down on that because that's actually what came to fruition. But 62 degrees, 20 degrees shy of the record high set back in 1972. Another day without rainfall sees this year departure go farther down into the negative category, hovering over 1/4 of an inch below where we should be. And sunrise yesterday, 7:26 a.m. Sunset was at 5:29 p.m. So sunset continuing to get a little bit later. However, sunrise is also continuing to get later. So let's talk about that. We haven't talked about these sunrise and sunset times in quite a while, but December 21st going to be the next important date for these sunrises and sunsets, because that is going to be the shortest day in terms of hours of daylight. We will have just under 10 hours of daylight at 9 hours and 59 minutes. Sunrise will continue to get later and later, all the way to 7:33, and your sunset actually going to go back after 5:30, but still 5:32 p.m. Our earliest sunset was 5:27 p.m., which we did have as of early last week. Not too much difference in those times. Then I put January 1st, which obviously may be a time that you are wanting to know what time the sunrise and sunset is going to be, and give or take a minute or two for December 31st if you have plans on New Year's Eve to be out and about pretty late into the night. 7:37, that's going to be your sunrise time, and I marked this date specifically because that is the latest that your sunrise does get. So there will be a good stretch of days, probably from January 1st all the way into around January 10th, where the sunrise will be at 7:37, but then after that mark, we will start to see the sunrise get a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier as the days get longer and longer. So not too much difference in between about this 10 or 11 day span, I do believe it is, in between hours of daylight. Only 3 more minutes, of daylight on January 1st compared to December 21st. And then January 25th, the next important day after that, 7:33 a.m. going to be your sunrise time. So once again, getting earlier because you see sunrise on the 21st at 7:33, going a little bit later to 7:37, and then going back to 7:33 as we go into the end of the month of January. But this will be our sunset returning to the 6 p.m. hour. It will be getting dark a little bit later and a little bit later each and every day. And then we are going to be very close to around 10.5 hours of daylight. These days will continue to get longer and longer until we get into the summertime season, and then around June 20th, June 21st, or 22nd, that first day of summer is going to be the longest day of the calendar year in terms of hours of daylight. So something to be on the lookout for as we wrap up the back half of December and head into the beginning of the new year. So your forecast for I almost said Wednesday, but today is Thursday, so your forecast for your Thursday, mostly sunny skies, but going to be cooler than yesterday, as that slightly cooler air is continuing to usher in from the north and the northwest. The breeze still going to be a bit gusty on occasion, those potential gusts up to 20 miles per hour, but 54 degrees for a high temperature as compared to what we did have as of yesterday, which was a high temperature of 62, right on par with average, but today is going to mark another below average day. So here's a look at your hour-by-hour temperatures. This meteorogram just undershooting it a little bit, but still within about a degree of what I have forecasted. So I am more inclined to believe this graphic as of today compared to yesterday. Topping out at 53 during that typical window, the 2, 3, and 4 o'clock window where we do hit our high temperature. Then you start to get into 5 o'clock, you get closer to sunset. That sun angle's a little bit lower, so your temperature begins to cool down. So we're into the upper 40s as we head into kind of dusk time around 6 p.m. And then, of course, as you go into 7, 8, or 9 o'clock later on this evening, maybe have plans to watch the Falcons on Thursday Night Football. Those temperatures are going to be in the low 40s and getting down into the upper 30s, I do imagine, before we get to the midnight hour. Satellite and radar picture doesn't show much left in the way of cloud cover whatsoever. I think all of these clouds around us, right over here around Swainsboro and Soperton, or back over to the west along the Chattahoochee River and the Georgia-Alabama state line, is going to continue to fizzle out. It's going to be a mostly sunny environment for the rest of today, and you can see there's not much going on here in the southeast United States. And that's because of what has filtered in behind yesterday's front. So the front has moved on. It's going down into southern Florida now and off the Atlantic coast. High pressure continues to slide over to the east. That's going to dry our environment out, but it is going to result in a steady warming trend. And in fact, it's going to be a pretty quick warming trend as we go as soon as tomorrow afternoon. So we'll talk about why that is. Take a look at future view throughout the rest of today. I want you to pay close attention to these wind arrows. Obviously not going to be as gusty as they were yesterday, not very long and not very yellow in color, but a steady breeze continues to blow out of the north and the northwest. So that's ushering in that cooler and that drier air behind the frontal boundary. Then we go into tomorrow morning. We start to see a bit of a shift in wind direction coming in from the west and the southwest. But 7 a.m. on Friday morning, you should expect some colder temperatures tomorrow morning as compared to today because we won't have as much of a breeze, but we also won't have as much in the way of cloud cover. So that was the second factor I was referring to earlier in the stream. When you have cloud cover present in those overnight hours, it does result in some warmer temperature values because it is blocking any of that radiation at the surface that you got the day before from going back out into the atmosphere. It tries to go back out, it reflects off the bottom of those clouds, and then it gets sent back down to the surface. So here's a look at your wind arrows, getting that shift in direction, but the first things first, it is going to be a very chilly start to your Friday morning. Make sure that you're making plans to bundle up. But as we continue to have a bit of a west and southwesterly direction with these winds, that's going to once again usher in a warmer air mass from that direction like we were talking about on Tuesday afternoon. So it is going to result in a fairly quick warm up back around average or maybe even above average as we go into Friday afternoon. Nothing but crystal clear skies. And then we walk out the door to maybe a few clouds in the forecast on Saturday morning. It does look like as we go later and later in the day, I think predominantly past sunset on going into Saturday evening, that's when we start to see approaching cloud cover, a few scattered light showers back over to the west and the northwest, and some of those make their presence known as early as Saturday night. Now, you shouldn't expect much in the way of rain, and this rain, probably just going about timing wise, isn't going to really impact your plans. But even if this was smack dab in the middle of the day, I would still tell you to keep your outdoor plans a go because this is not going to be a very significant rain chance. If you do get a shower, it's going to be very brief and it's going to be pretty light in nature, but also look at all of central Georgia that's not receiving some rain. So I have a very low rain chance surrounding Saturday evening and Saturday night, but that rain chance will continue as we go into the overnight and early morning hours on Sunday because you can start to see maybe a bit of organization, a fairly broken line of showers, some pockets of heavier rain than others, and that line takes a more organized formation as we go into the overnight and early morning hours on Sunday. And this is as far out as future view goes, but it does look like we could receive our fair share of showers as we go into the overnight and early morning time frame towards the end of the weekend. This is lining up perfectly with not interrupting any of your outdoor plans because many of you will be fast asleep. And this line very likely will be gone by the time many of you are waking up early on Sunday, maybe to get and catch an early morning church service. Overall, the ground might be a little bit wet, but I don't think it's going to be a forecast on Sunday morning that you'll necessarily need the umbrella and the rain jacket for. But we'll get a better idea as we get Saturday or Sunday as a whole within view this time tomorrow on Future View. Let's talk about the breeze because it was a big factor yesterday and we are still going to hold on to it, but it will steadily subside as we go throughout the afternoon. So starting to see those shades of blue get out of the picture, and then eventually we go into the overnight and early morning time frame tomorrow without much of a breeze whatsoever. So we're not really looking at, say, maybe some of the winds making the feels like temperatures feel even colder like we did for this morning. But going into the afternoon, Friday, we should see a bit of an uptick in the breeze. Once again, coming out of that south and southwesterly direction, that is going to continue to usher in that warmer air mass throughout the afternoon tomorrow. So I think Friday afternoon going to feel pretty similar to what we did have as of yesterday Wednesday, excuse me, and getting my days all mixed up. But Friday afternoon should feel pretty similar to what we had in store on Wednesday afternoon. Not as breezy of conditions, but we should have some similar feeling high temperatures. Then we go into Saturday, not too much of a breeze, and then the winds begin to pick up as our frontal boundary, that next frontal boundary, will be making its way through. I do imagine Sunday afternoon is probably going to be a bit of a breezy day after that front makes its way clean through central Georgia. So we could have some winds like what are present up in North Georgia as we go into the afternoon on Sunday, say up to maybe 20, 25 mile per hour gusts or even a 30 mile per hour gust. That's not out of the question because we saw that happen as of yesterday. So for the next 3 days, what do you need to know? No rain chances today, no rain chances on Friday. Any plans that you do have at the beginning of the weekend, or if you're getting an early start to the weekend today, they are looking good to go. Just still going to be on the chillier side with a bit of that breeze lingering and some below average high temperatures somewhere in the mid 50s. And then I think one last kind of hour or time frame of the cool down will be in store for Friday morning, low temperature of 31 degrees. But then we begin the warming trend as we head into the afternoon. We get that shift in winds, ushering in that warmer air mass, 64 degrees for a high temperature and nothing but sunshine as you wrap up the work week. Then we go into Saturday morning low temperatures feeling a little bit better, 40 degrees to start out the day. and an afternoon high temperature of 68 degrees. But don't get fooled by this icon. I know obviously it has the cloud icon, it has the rain icon on it. However, notice what I outlined for this. Evening. I think evening is going to be the earliest chance that we do have at seeing a couple of spotty showers, but still not going to really interrupt any plans. If you are worried about the rain chance, maybe interrupting your outdoor plans, just have the rain jacket ready to go, but it's not too significant of a rain chance, and it's mainly going to be past sunset that a couple of these showers do begin to pop up. Now let's talk about December as a whole, because I mentioned it's been a very cold and it has been a very dreary start to the month. Well, speaking of the high temperatures, yesterday we did hit average. We hit the average high of 62 degrees. That's the first day all month. I know we're only 10 days in, but the first time in 10 days that we have seen at least around average high temperatures. Each day to begin the month has been nestled somewhere in the 50s for highs or even the 40s when we had that stretch of very dreary and cold weather that was present last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and lingered a little bit into Sunday. We had a bit of a cool down as we went into Tuesday afternoon, but not too different from what the high temperature was on Monday, but plenty of blue boxes on this December high temperatures graphic. What do you see nothing of? That would be the red box indicating above average high temperatures. So it does look like Friday and Saturday both are going to clock our first red boxes that we do see for the month of December, but not after we add one more blue box, and that's going to be for your high temperature today. And I do believe these above average high temperatures, they are going to be very short-lived. Let's talk about those rain chances first and foremost. A frontal boundary moving through is going to be driving these rain chances. So that's why we do see some scattered showers that could linger around into the morning hours, maybe into church time on Sunday at the very latest, but this is just what the European model is picking up on more than, say, the GFS. And it looks like our short range model is finally getting that rain within view, and it looks like that rain is moving through a bit earlier than what the long range models are picking apart. But that front sweeps through, it dries us out, pushes all the cloud cover out of the picture. So we're wrapping up Sunday on a pretty nice note. Well, that's where the nice conditions end. You may say, Alex, Monday looks good too. In fact, Tuesday also looks good, even going all the way into Wednesday and next Thursday, they do look good. Well, yes, the conditions might be more suitable in terms of drier weather as we go into the beginning of next week, but it's not necessarily a story of crystal clear skies as we transition into next Monday. It is going to be the coldest air mass that we have seen so far over recent months, really going back into last winter, that is going to settle in. So your afternoon high temperatures, we go up the roller coaster in between today, tomorrow, and into Saturday. But then we start to feel that cooler air making its presence known. Still slightly below average for your high temperature on Sunday. Not too different than how it will feel as of this afternoon, maybe even a little bit better feeling than what we'll have this afternoon. But then the high temperatures drop off a cliff. 45 degrees for a high temperature on Monday. So it is obviously going to be a very brisk atmosphere on Monday. And if we have some winds to pair up with that, you remember when we had that very cold spell that I was referring to around Veterans Day, we very well could have some wind chill values that stay in the upper 30s in the afternoon hours. If we have winds present on Monday with those temperatures, that still remains to be seen as of right now. I don't think we'll have too many gusty winds present as we go into that time frame. So we do see a drop in between your morning low temperature today and into tomorrow, but then we get the warming trend going like we do see on the high temperature graphic just a little bit later. And then those numbers drop off the cliff once again. 22 degrees for a morning low temperature on Monday. Lowest model I saw this morning was calling for 20 degrees flat. So we have seen good agreement and a very good drop in terms of those morning low temperatures compared to just 2 days ago when I had a forecasted low of 32 degrees on Monday. That's why obviously we tell you to never plan out ahead a week in time, because look at that. That's a difference of 10 degrees over a 2-day period of what the models have been saying. It is going to be very cold air. That's getting into the neighborhood of 10 degrees below freezing temperature, and that's around the neighborhood of 16 degrees below your average low of 38 degrees. So a big time cold spell will be in store for not only Monday morning, but also Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, and even Tuesday afternoon. I know 54 does look a lot warmer than 45 degrees, but 54 for an afternoon high temperature going to feel pretty similar to this afternoon, which is also on the cooler side. It's once we get into Wednesday next week that we do see signs of a better warming trend. At least getting your morning low temperatures back to around freezing temperature. But the afternoon highs should be quite a treat, so that's going to be some dress and layers weather, or an afternoon that you can finally shed the layers. And speaking of that, Friday and Saturday, both of the next 2 afternoons should be some afternoon weather that you finally can at least take the heavy coat off. You may want some form of light layering. However, with these temperatures getting pretty close to 70 degrees, I think it's going to feel absolutely incredible. Maybe even some long sleeve t-shirt and shorts weather, or the opposite. Maybe you're wearing your jeans and your pants, but you can just wear a polo up top, because it is going to feel pretty incredible and not something that you want to be dressed very, very warm for. But then we go into Sunday afternoon, a little bit cooler. You'll probably want the jacket handy just in case, and you're definitely going to want to break out the winter coat once again as we go into Monday and Tuesday. 45, obviously not the lowest that we can see our high temperatures go, but it would be one of the lowest high temperatures we've seen as of recently. Remember, I told you 46 degrees for the month of December. That's our lowest high temperature. It's looking like more and more confidence because these numbers just continue to drop day by day. So I wouldn't doubt that we see that number go down even farther as we go into Monday afternoon. But just prepare for this big cold spell. It is going to be on its way, but all the more reason to soak up the pleasant conditions for Friday and into Saturday. Once we get into the evening hours at the earliest, I think most of the rain is trending more so towards the nighttime hours, probably around 9 to 10, 11, or 12 on Saturday night. And they will continue overnight, but I'm still holding on to the rain chance in the morning hours on Sunday. I will preface this as early morning if we continue to see good model agreement about that line really coming in more so overnight into around the time before you would typically wake up on a Sunday morning. But the earlier that front comes through, the cooler this temperature value is going to be on Sunday afternoon, because that cooler air mass will start to usher in a little bit earlier than anticipated. So obviously that would be counteracting our general warming trend that we do see throughout the day. But I do see signs of not much going on after we get this cold front to pass at the end of this weekend. We'll have that big cold spell at the beginning of next week, but I don't see signs of another front coming through whatsoever. We already went out to next Thursday on the long range models, didn't see anything significant in the way of rain chances or organized weather systems, and a lot of the models agree with that. It does look like we could hit a stretch of extended warm weather, so finally getting a good stretch of not only just 2 days, but maybe a couple of days of some above average temperatures towards the end of next weekend and getting into next weekend, which will be that last weekend before we get into the Christmas holiday. So obviously want some more appropriate feeling temperatures for the Christmas holiday itself. I've had my fair share of 80-degree Christmases in the past. They're not too enjoyable because you want it to feel a little bit like Christmas outside, but it will be a much more pleasant stretch, and we'll start to do more Christmas graphics as we get closer and closer and get a better idea of it, of course, out in the future. We'll be planning out your Christmas Day, your Christmas Eve forecast well out in advance and telling you the trends, what we're seeing, what the changes are, and we'll go back and look at the past couple of Christmases, because you can always put the weather in perspective no matter how bad or how good that you do think it is. It's very likely that it has been better or it has been worse at sometimes in the past. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast this Thursday. Hopefully we can get a widespread rainmaker eventually, because obviously that drought monitor not seeing any improvement. Not the best sign, because that was one of our most significant rainmakers over the course of the last 3 months. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Hopefully it doesn't line up with any Christmas Eve or Christmas Day festivities. But until then, we'll continue to keep you posted. Soak up Friday and Saturday afternoons before we begin that big cool down into the beginning of next week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at 11 a.m. once again tomorrow.